With temperatures consistently in the 90s, heat can be a major influence on plant growth. According to Nebraska Extension forage specialist Bruce Anderson, alfalfa can bloom early in these hotter days, but that doesn't mean it's ready for harvest. We sat down with Bruce on Monday to learn more about when to harvest alfalfa in higher temperatures.
Well, certainly this is a pretty opportune time to talk about high temperatures because we've been experiencing those days in the 90-degree range and above, and evenings that don't get below 70 degrees. And I think anybody who's experienced those kind of temperatures themselves recognize how uncomfortable it can be for us. Well, certainly the plants that are out there in the field, they're experiencing it maybe even worse than we do. And alfalfa is no exception. In fact, alfalfa may have some particular characteristics in the high heat that we have to be more knowledgeable about and recognizing how it reacts to that high heat. For instance, when the temperatures get real high like they have been lately, alfalfa tends to show its maturity much more quickly. Now, typically we may have a harvest interval planned of maybe 28 to 35 days between each cutting. But when we start getting temperatures like we've been experiencing recently above 90 degrees, it's not unusual to see that alfalfa starting to bloom in 25, 21. I've seen it even within 18 days after cutting. And while we think that that bloom then may indicate to us that the alfalfa is ready for harvest, in fact, it's very misleading because it actually takes the alfalfa more time to really fully recover from the previous cutting when it's real hot than when we have maybe more mild conditions for those alfalfa plants. It just misleads us with how fast it shows that bloom.
And one of the concerns is the heat at night.
That's right. The heat at night is part of the real problem, that the alfalfa plant never really gets to maybe recover from that daytime heat. It has that nighttime high temperature, and it keeps on metabolizing faster and faster the warmer the temperatures get. And this faster metabolism is part of the factors that influence that rapid maturity. And so one of the things that really can mislead us with that early bloom is if we follow that bloom and harvest that alfalfa after maybe only 20 days of recovery. One of the things we see is that the alfalfa plant has not replenished its nutrient reserves in the root and crown. And that's what the alfalfa plant uses in order to initiate and recover with its regrowth. The plant needs to have excess amounts of the carbohydrates and the proteins that it produces during the day in order to start building those additional reserves. And when it's hot out, the plant just simply doesn't have that excess amount. And so instead of taking a normal time really for the alfalfa plant to reach that point where it is fully recovered from our previous cutting, it actually takes longer than it normally would, rather than the shorter time that it seems to indicate by that fast bloom.
So what recommendations do you make for decisions about doing the harvest?
Well, I think the thing that we probably need to do is kind of keep track on the calendar of when we took a harvest, and recognizing that if the temperatures are high, we have to kind of ignore when that bloom occurs and instead look at the calendar and say, well, normally I'm going to take a harvest in 28, 30, 35 days, something like that, and hold off until that time, no matter what the plant might be showing us, so that we do give the plant at least adequate time to be prepared to regrow rapidly for us after that cutting.
Now, there's also a concern about the value, is there not?
There certainly is. As that alfalfa plant is getting more mature, it's getting more stemmy, it's doing it faster because of this high heat. Of course, the feed value is going down. Not only, though, is the feed value going down because of that rapid maturity, but the high heat also tends to cause the plant to kind of burn out its good nutrients. High temperature forces the plants to use especially the carbohydrates that it's producing with photosynthesis. The sugars, the starches, those types of compounds that are really valuable to the animals that will eventually consume that alfalfa are going to be missing from the alfalfa plant because the high temperature causes that plant to burn them out, both during the day and especially during the high temperature nights that are ahead there. So it's not unusual for us to harvest alfalfa that's been growing in high heat. take a test of that alfalfa to see what its nutrient content is. And we might have high protein because all those carbohydrates have been burned out, so it tends to concentrate the protein. We also have high fiber in that alfalfa plant, which typically is considered undesirable. And so we have low energy value from the alfalfa. It kind of confuses us a little bit as to why do we have high protein, which we consider good, but we have very poor digestibility and energy, which we would consider bad. And it's because the energy has been burned out of the plant and the protein and the fiber has been left behind to be more concentrated.